My girlfriend yelled, "Your love sickened me," and called me a freak when I tried to hug her. Now she acts like I'm a stranger who doesn't earn her touch ever again. Crumbled in an instant, and I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The air in our bedroom thickened, heavy with unspoken accusations and a sudden, terrifying coldness. One simple hug had unleashed a storm I never saw coming. I'm Ethan, 28, and for 2 years, I genuinely believed I'd found the one who understood how I loved. But I was so profoundly wrong. My way of showing affection has always been through touch. Not in a creepy way, just natural closeness, holding hands, a hug from behind while cooking, running my fingers through tired hair, a forehead kiss when she was deep in thought. That's my love language, how I'm wired. I never imagined it would lead to someone calling me a pervert. When I met Olivia 2 years ago at a friend's birthday in Savannah, she seemed to adore it. She'd smile when I pulled her close, lean into me on the couch, laugh when I'd randomly kiss her cheek while she brushed her teeth. More than once, she told me, "I feel so safe with you." That made me feel like I was doing everything right. For that first year, everything was just perfect. Effortless. We didn't have to think about being too much or not enough. We just fit. After 12 months, moving in together felt like the most natural next step for two people completely smitten. Our apartment was small but cozy, a single bedroom in a decent neighborhood about 15 minutes from both our jobs in Charlotte. Those first few months living together were everything I'd dreamed of. We'd cook dinner, fall asleep talking, wake up tangled together. I felt like the luckiest man alive. I never pushed. If she was tired, I backed off. If she needed space, I gave it. I thought I was being attentive, respectful. But apparently, I was building up to something I couldn't see. Around month 4 of living together, things began to shift. Small things, at first. Olivia's job got more stressful. She worked in marketing for a startup going through major layoffs and restructuring. She started coming home absolutely drained, around 7 or 8, sometimes later. She'd drop her bag, collapse on the couch, barely saying a word. I tried to help the only way I knew how, cooking her favorite meals, rubbing her shoulders, hugging her from behind while she stared at her phone, trying to show her she wasn't alone. But slowly, week by week, I felt her pulling away. Not dramatically, just subtle shifts. Turning her head when I leaned in for a kiss, tensing slightly when I put my arm around her, quick one-armed hugs instead of the full embraces we used to share. I started second-guessing myself, wondering if I was imagining it. Every time I asked, "Are you okay?" or "Is everything all right with us?" she'd say she was just tired from work. So I believed her, kept trying to be supportive. The distance grew wider. We went from being intimate multiple times a week to maybe once every 2 weeks, and even then, it felt mechanical, like she was just going through the motions. I told myself it was a phase, that work stress does this to people, that we'd get through it. But deep down, I started feeling a rejection I didn't know how to articulate. Then came the night that changed everything. And I mean everything about how I saw myself and how I existed in relationships. It was a Wednesday. Olivia came home late, around 9. She ate the dinner I made in silence, scrolling through her phone, then went straight to bed around 9:30. I gave her an hour, watching TV alone, trying not to feel hurt by how disconnected we'd become. Then I went to bed. She was lying there, facing away from me. We hadn't been close in days, maybe over a week, and I just missed her. Not in a demanding way, just genuinely missed the woman I loved. So I carefully slid over and wrapped my arms around her from behind. Just a simple hug, the kind we used to do every single night without thinking. She went rigid. Before I could even ask what was wrong, she shoved my arms off and practically jumped out of bed, turning to face me. Her expression was something I'd never seen before, pure disgust mixed with anger. She screamed, "Get away from me. You're disgusting." I literally froze. My brain couldn't process it. Then she said the words that have been playing on repeat in my head ever since, "You're a pervert. All you think about is that." I just sat there in our bed, feeling like I'd been slapped across the face. I stammered, "I'm sorry. I just wanted to show you I love you," but my voice sounded pathetic even to me. She shot back, "Your way of loving me makes me uncomfortable," grabbed her pillow, and walked out. I sat there in the dark for 20 minutes, unmoving, trying to understand. Replaying every touch, every hug, every moment of affection over 2 years, wondering if I'd been violating her this whole time without realizing it. The shame was immediate, crushing. It felt like someone had poured concrete into my chest. I felt disgusting. A creep. Like everything natural and loving about me was actually wrong, perverted. Eventually, I got up and went to the living room. She was already asleep on the couch. I grabbed a blanket, made a bed on the floor. Not because I was angry, but because I was ashamed to be near her, ashamed of my hands, my instincts, the way I loved. That night, lying on the hardwood floor of my own apartment, listening to her breathe above me, something fundamental inside me shut down. A switch flipped from open to closed. I knew even then I might never flip it back. The next morning, I woke up with my neck aching, my mind numb. My brain had shut down emotional processing to protect itself. Olivia was already gone to work, left early without waking me. I spent the day moving through our apartment like a ghost, showering, eating, but not truly present. When she came home that evening, around 7, we didn't talk about it. She acted like nothing happened, walked in with takeout, asked about my day in this casual tone that felt insane after what she'd said. I responded with basic answers because I didn't know what else to do. But something fundamental had changed in me. I didn't stop loving Olivia. Not even close. But I completely stopped touching her. Every time the thought crossed my mind to reach for her hand, hug her, do any of the 1,000 small affectionate gestures that used to be automatic, I'd hear her voice screaming disgusting and pervert, and my body would freeze. I became hyper-aware of every movement, constantly monitoring myself like I was a threat. Measuring the distance on the couch, keeping my hands visible, asking permission in my head before any physical contact. I was still kind, still cooked dinner, asked about her day, listened when she vented about her startup, did my share of cleaning. But physically, I created an invisible barrier I refused to cross. The weirdest part was that I started questioning everything about myself. Lying awake at night, running through our entire relationship, wondering if I'd always been too much, if I'd crossed boundaries without realizing it. If my natural way of showing love was inappropriate and I'd been too blind to see it. I felt like I needed explicit permission just to exist next to her. And that's a horrible way to feel in your own home with someone you love. About 2 weeks into this new dynamic, Olivia started noticing. I could see the confusion when I'd move away if she got too close, when I'd give her space on the couch even though we used to sit pressed together, or when I'd sleep on my side of the bed without reaching for her. She tried to joke about it one evening, saying something like, "You're being weird lately," with an awkward laugh. I just smiled and said I was tired, which became my default response. Then she started initiating contact. It felt like a twisted reversal. She'd hug me randomly, touch my arm, lean against me while we watched TV. I'd respond, but it felt hollow, like I was performing the role of an affectionate boyfriend. The warmth that used to come naturally was gone, replaced by a careful politeness that kept me safe from doing anything wrong. One night, about 3 weeks after the incident, she sat me down on the couch. With a serious expression, she said, "You can touch me again." I didn't mean what I said. There was something almost casual about it, like she was giving me permission to go back to normal. Like her words hadn't fundamentally altered how I saw myself. I nodded, said, "Okay." But inside, I felt absolutely nothing. Apologies don't immediately heal shame, and permission doesn't automatically restore something that's been broken. Shame becomes part of how you see yourself. It's not just about one moment, it's about this new understanding that something fundamental about you is wrong. You can't just flip a switch and unlearn that. A few nights later, maybe 5 days after she'd given me permission, Olivia tried to initiate intimacy. We were in bed around 11, and she started touching me in ways that used to drive me crazy, moving closer, making it very clear what she wanted. I just lay there, completely disconnected from my own body. Nothing happened. Not because I didn't find her attractive anymore, but because my body had learned to protect itself by shutting down. And that protection system didn't come with an off switch. I quietly said, "I'm tired," which was technically true but utterly inadequate to explain what was going on. I turned away, feeling her confusion and hurt radiating across the small space. She didn't push it, didn't ask questions. She just rolled over to her side. We lay in silence for what felt like hours, before she fell asleep. The next morning was awkward in ways our relationship had never been. We moved around each other in the bathroom like roommates who barely knew each other. I could feel her watching me, trying to figure out what had changed. This pattern continued for a couple of weeks, her trying to bridge the gap, me politely deflecting and maintaining distance. Both of us pretending everything was fine while our relationship slowly died from lack of connection. I started spending more time at the gym after work, taking longer walks around the neighborhood, finding excuses not to be in the apartment. Being around her meant constantly monitoring myself, and that was exhausting. My friends noticed. Marcus, one of my buddies, asked if everything was okay with Olivia and me during a basketball game one Saturday. I just said we were going through a rough patch, which felt like the understatement of the century. I thought about talking to someone, maybe a therapist, but I felt too ashamed to even articulate what had happened. Saying it out loud would make it more real, confirm that yes, my way of loving someone was disgusting and perverted and wrong. Olivia started getting frustrated with my distance. I saw it building, an edge in her voice, heavy sighs when I moved away, pointed comments about how we never did anything together anymore. One evening, about 6 weeks after that initial night, we were sitting on opposite ends of the couch, both staring at our phones instead of the TV. I looked at her and felt this overwhelming sadness. Not anger, just a profound sadness that we'd ended up here. Two people who used to fit together so naturally, now existing in the same space like strangers. I saw the confusion in her eyes, this unspoken question of what happened to the man she'd moved in with. I wanted to explain that he was still there, just buried under layers of shame, fear, and self-doubt that I didn't know how to remove. But I didn't say any of that. I just scrolled through my phone, and the distance grew wider. I knew something was going to break soon. We couldn't keep existing in this weird limbo, together but not really together. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning, about 8 weeks after everything started falling apart. I was making coffee in the kitchen, still in my pajamas, when Olivia walked in. Her expression was a mix of anger and desperation that immediately put me on edge. She didn't say good morning, didn't go through any pleasantries. Instead, she just looked at me and asked, "Who is she?" I was so genuinely confused that I actually laughed, which was apparently the worst possible response. She repeated the question, louder this time, "Who is she, Ethan?" I realized she was serious. She actually believed I was involved with someone else. That the distance, the coldness, the complete shutdown of physical affection was because I'd found another woman. I set my coffee mug down carefully and said, "There's no one, Liv. There's literally no one." But she wasn't buying it. She started listing all the evidence, like she'd been building a case for weeks, how I didn't touch her anymore, how I avoided being home, how I spent all my time at the gym, how I couldn't even look at her the same way, how I'd completely shut down in bed that night. According to her logic, the only explanation was another woman. I stood there, listening to her lay out this theory that was so far from the truth it would have been funny if it wasn't so sad. Something in me just snapped. Not in anger, but like a dam breaking. I told her everything I'd been holding in for 2 months. I told her how her words that night had destroyed something in me. How I couldn't hug her without hearing disgusting echo in my head. How I felt like a predator in my own relationship. How I'd spent 8 weeks questioning every natural instinct I had about showing love. How I couldn't even initiate intimacy anymore because my body had learned to associate my own affection with shame. I told her about lying awake analyzing every touch we'd ever shared, wondering if I'd been violating her boundaries for 2 years without knowing it. How I'd become terrified of my own hands. How I felt like I needed written permission just to exist in the same space as her. The words poured out in a stream of consciousness I couldn't control. She just stood there, listening. I watched her face go through different emotions, confusion, realization, something that might have been guilt. But when I finally stopped talking and waited for her response, what she said made everything so much worse. "You're overreacting," she said. Not cruelly, but dismissively, like my pain was some dramatic interpretation rather than a valid response to being called disgusting and a pervert by the person I loved. She explained that she'd been stressed that night, that she didn't mean it the way it sounded, that I should have known she was just having a bad day and didn't actually think those things about me. And with every word, I felt something inside me die a little more. I realized in that moment that my pain wasn't valid to her. My love language being called perverted wasn't a big deal to her. She expected me to just get over it because she'd apologized and given me permission to touch her again. Like that should have been enough to undo 2 months of shame and self-hatred. I asked her if she understood why her words had hurt so much, why calling someone disgusting for trying to hug them might leave a lasting impact. She said, "I get it, but you're being too sensitive." That's when I knew, with absolute certainty, that I couldn't stay in this relationship. Not because I didn't love her anymore, but because I would never feel safe being myself around her again. The next few days were strange. We barely spoke, moving around each other like ghosts. I started quietly looking at apartments online during my lunch breaks, checking what I could afford on my own, making plans I didn't share with her yet. I called my brother, Marcus, one night from my car after leaving the gym, sitting in the parking lot for over an hour. I told him everything, the whole story. He just listened without judgment, then said, "You can't live like this, man," and offered to help me move whenever I was ready. That made me realize I had people who understood this wasn't about being too sensitive or overreacting. About a week after that Saturday morning confrontation, I made the decision. I found a studio apartment about 20 minutes away in a decent area, put down a deposit using money I'd been saving for a vacation we'd talked about taking, and gave myself a deadline to tell her. The night I told her was a Thursday evening. We were sitting at the kitchen table after dinner, and I just said, "I'm moving out," without any build-up or explanation. I watched her face go through shock, disbelief, confusion, then panic in about 5 seconds. She immediately started crying, asking why, saying we could fix this, that she was sorry, that she'd do better, that she'd never say anything like that again. I felt terrible because I could see she was genuinely upset. But I also knew that staying would mean slowly erasing myself until there was nothing left. She begged me to reconsider, promised therapy, asked what she could do differently. I realized she still didn't understand that this wasn't about one night or one set of words. It was about a fundamental incompatibility between who I was and what made her comfortable. I tried to explain it one more time. Told her I couldn't be in a relationship where showing love made me hate myself. Where I had to constantly monitor and suppress my natural instincts. Where my way of caring for someone was treated as a problem to be managed. She argued that every couple goes through rough patches, that this was fixable if I just tried. But I knew it wasn't. The damage was too deep, and her inability to understand why it was damaged in the first place meant we'd just end up here again. I spent the next week and a half packing my things while she alternated between crying, being angry, trying to seduce me, and giving me the silent treatment. It was exhausting and heartbreaking, but I didn't waver. I knew if I stayed, I'd lose myself completely. The day I moved out was a Saturday, 2 weeks after I told her. She wasn't there, she'd gone to stay with her mom in the suburbs. She said she couldn't watch me leave. Honestly, I was grateful. I don't think I could have handled a big emotional scene. I loaded my stuff into Marcus's truck with his help. We made 3 trips back and forth to the new studio. When we were done, I took one last look at the apartment we'd shared, the couch where we used to watch movies, the kitchen where I'd cooked so many dinners, the bedroom where everything had fallen apart. I left my key on the kitchen counter next to a note that just said, "Take care of yourself." I didn't know what else to write. Then I walked out and locked the door behind me. Driving away, following Marcus's truck, I didn't feel relief or happiness. Just this heavy sadness mixed with the smallest bit of hope that maybe I could learn to be myself again. It's been a month since I left. I'm settled into my studio. It's small, quiet, and mine. Just one room with a kitchenette and a bathroom. But it feels safe in a way that other apartment never did after that night. I'm slowly learning to exist without that constant anxiety about whether I'm too much or not enough. And I've started going to therapy, which I probably should have done months ago, but I wasn't ready then. Olivia has texted me a few times, apologies, requests to talk, to meet up for coffee, to explain herself better. But I haven't responded. I don't think there's anything left to say. I need this space to figure out who I am without shame attached to every instinct I have. I don't hate her. I really don't. And I hope she finds someone whose love language matches hers. But I learned something painful through all of this. Sometimes relationships don't end because love disappears. They end because one person realizes they're not allowed to love the way they are. And staying means choosing someone else's comfort over your own existence. I finally chose myself. Even though it hurts, even though I miss what we had before everything changed, I know it was the right choice. Because I'm learning to breathe again. What do you think about this story?